Welcome to today's episode of Big Dawg Sports Unleashed. Today is episode 7, and we will be covering our top 16 NFL quarterback rankings. So top 16 meaning the top half of starting quarterbacks in the NFL, and those that are most likely to be considered franchise quarterbacks, although shocker, not all of them are of that status, and these are the ones most likely to hold on to their job, get paid, and lead your team to the promised land. If you don't have one of these, then your chances of winning the Super Bowl next year or any year you don't have one are extremely slight. Very rare for a team to get to the promised land and win a Super Bowl without at least an average to above average quarterback. So we're going to start this list today at number 1. Although there was much consideration between 3 different players for number 1. Number 1 in our quarterback rankings is Josh Allen, the reigning MVP. Personally, I do think that Lamar Jackson had the better individual season last year, but Josh Allen overall has the more complete framework of what I'd be looking for in a franchise quarterback. And so before we go any further, it is important to note, what do we consider in these rankings? Is it who had the best season last year? Who's going to be the best this year? Who's had the best career? So when cultivating these top 16 quarterback rankings, what we're looking at is right now in time. Ultimately, we're going to look at how, if I was trying to win the Super Bowl in this upcoming 2025 season, who would I want to lead that team? But in doing this snapshot in time of who's the best quarterback to lead a team to the Super Bowl right now, we're looking at all different things that you can measure a quarterback by. Obviously, ability to pass for yards and ability to pass for touchdowns, ability to control the pocket and navigate the pocket, ability to rush the ball, ability to scramble. And we're looking at leadership traits. Are they making their teammates better, getting their team to play hard for them? Are they holding their teammates accountable? Are they clutch? Are they stepping up in the fourth quarter or on the final drive or in the playoffs to make the plays when they need to be made the most? A la Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady-esque behavior. And conversely, are the opposite? Are they lacking influence? Are they not able to elevate their team? Playoffs are important, wins are important, but obviously there's more to it, since every quarterback has their own unique situation of coach and, career experience before them, college experience, skill set. So all of those things included is what we're looking at here. So, as I mentioned, Josh Allen is number 1 in our quarterback rankings, and a large reason of that is because I honestly think that, 1, I trust his arm more than I trust Lamar Jackson's. I think he has a bigger arm, and although Jackson's is great, I think Josh Allen has as good of arm as anyone in the NFL. Additionally, he rushes for so many touchdowns. He's probably the best overall rushing quarterback in the NFL, in the sense that he's more physical and he rushes for a ton of touchdowns, and he is almost never getting hurt. He's extremely durable, and really the main reason that I had him over Jackson and Mahomes in these rankings is his increased playoff success. Neither him nor Lamar Jackson have been to a Super Bowl yet, even though they're each considered, in my opinion, 2 of the top 3 elite quarterbacks in the league. But Josh Allen has had significantly more playoff success than Lamar Jackson thus far. He has a 7-6 record in the playoffs, and the Bills beat the Ravens in the playoffs last year to go to the AFC Championship game in Baltimore. So that's only 1 win, and obviously that factors in their entire teams. But honestly, Baltimore's generally had a more talented defense, and they got Derrick Henry, which, although James Cook had a great season, is superior clearly at running back there. The fact that he could get over that hump, and he's dominated a lot more in the playoffs. He has 25 touchdowns to 4 interceptions in the playoffs in his career, whereas Lamar has significantly less touchdowns and more interceptions, less wins. So ultimately, that's what pushed me over the edge. His better ability to rush for touchdowns, increased durability, slightly better arm upside, and his increased playoff success. All that to say, Lamar Jackson is our number 2 quarterback in our rankings, and I do believe he had the more impressive individual regular season last year. Last year is about as dope as any quarterback could play, and he had 4,600 passing yards, 45 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions last year, and he ran for over 1,000 yards rushing as well. So those are amazing stats. So I honestly would have voted for him for the MVP last year. I don't have the voter fatigue of how many you've won before and what echelon that puts you in as a player compared to the all-time greats. No, I'm looking at each season and what did you do and what did you have to work with compared to what they did. And it was close. Josh Allen is certainly worthy. Obviously, we got him number one in our rankings here, but I do think the regular season was a little more impressive for Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson is the best rushing quarterback in the history of the NFL. Josh Allen is more durable and he rushes for more touchdowns, but Lamar's ability to make defenders account for him and frankly just make them miss is astounding. And considering how much he has run for, how many rushes, how many yards, and all of that, it's astounding that he has been as healthy as he has so far in his career. But I don't know how sustainable that is. That's a huge tenet of his game. Although he has developed as a pocket passer, that is a huge factor in his success, and I don't think that that's going to be as sustainable long term. So we'll see. I definitely still think he's got it now, and probably for at least a few more years, but that's something that's likely going to be physically wearing down over time. At number 3, we have Patrick Mahomes, who feels weird to not have him at 1 just because his career arc is the best I've ever seen of any player at any position basically in the NFL. He's got 7 full seasons now. So feels weird to not have him at 1, but frankly, although he continues to get the job done in the playoffs, they got blown out by the Eagles in the Super Bowl, but he's won 3 Super Bowls and has been starting for less than a decade, and he's made the AFC Championship game in every single season that he has started. That is absolutely unfathomable wild. I would not believe that anyone could do that or would do that if it didn't exist. It's one thing to do it for even 3 or 4 years, but to do it for as long as he's done it now, it is just absolutely dominant. And so Patrick Mahomes is amazing, but what lowers him on this list is the fact that his production in the regular season for the last 2 seasons has been significantly declined and more importantly lower than Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. He's thrown for less touchdowns than he had been before. They had been an over-the-top offensive juggernaut for the first 5 years, really, of the Patrick Mahomes era in Kansas City, ever since taking over for Alex Smith after sitting 1 year as a backup. The last 2 years, almost 3, that has not been the case. Although he's gotten it done in the fourth quarter and in the playoffs, their defense has carried them significantly over the last couple of years. Chris Jones and other stars on that defense, Steve Spagnuolo with his 4 rings as defensive coordinator, have more than carried their weight. They've been the strength of the team the last year and a half plus. So although Mahomes is obviously already a Hall of Famer, no doubt, all 3 of these guys are actually, but his resume is the most undebatable. He does fall behind them because they've carried their teams a lot more in the regular season over the last couple years and deservedly won their MVPs for doing so. Patrick Mahomes' record as a quarterback, to share a few more highlights, 89-23. As a starter is unreal, and even crazier in the playoffs, 17-4. That is absolutely nuts. He has had 7 seasons as a starter, 7 AFC championship games reached, and then of those he's won 5 and then lost 2 Super Bowls, one to the Bucks and Tom Brady, and then now the other 2, Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, but won 3 Super Bowls in that span. So he's been to 5 Super Bowls in 7 seasons. In the other 2 years, he fell just a game short of the Super Bowl. That is what every team wishes that their team could have: consistently elite production and going deep in the playoffs and cashing a few in. So on top of that, in the playoffs, 46 touchdown passes and 10 interceptions in his career. So clearly carrying the load, scoring a lot there, and not hurting his team. There's a big drop off from number 3 to below. That's our super elite tier. Those top 3 guys. After this, it becomes a bit more questionable. All these guys have more question marks than, the top 3 guys in Allen, Jackson, and Mahomes. But who I got number 4 is Joe Burrow. He's had fantastic production whenever he's played since he joined the NFL. One thing I really like about his game is his pocket presence. I just feel like it reminds me of Aaron Rodgers in his prime too, where just the footwork is so key to navigate the pocket so that rushers aren't releasing onto him, and so that he always has outlets and room to run or step up and pass or scramble and pass. And so I really like his pocket presence, his ability to connect with Jamar Chase, but also other weapons. Obviously, T. Higgins has been phenomenal. They can put up some wild video game like stats. Last year, he had 43 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. He's missed the playoffs the last 2 years, but I do think winning is a stat worth mentioning for quarterbacks, certainly more than it is worth mentioning for pitchers in baseball. But ultimately, Burrow has not been a problem, or at least not been the reason that they have been missing the playoffs. That organization is one of the weaker ones in the league. With Mike Brown, they're not led well at the top. They consistently have huge holes at offensive line and across different defensive positions. So he's done more with that than I think most people possibly could have, to be honest. So I don't really knock him for that. But he also has prevented him from having more of a resume, that and a couple injuries, to where he could have established himself as consistently and dominant as the other three guys have. Again, these are more debatable and could fluctuate quickly based on how these quarterbacks do in the upcoming season. But at number 5, I have Justin Herbert. He's had great production, great arm. He is a extremely natural passer, and it's fun to watch him just dissect defenses and throw accurate passes, and his frame allows him to throw great deep passes as well. Justin Herbert does not have any playoff success. He's 0-2 in the playoffs, one of which was that extremely memorable, up 27-0 in the second half against the Jaguars collapse that led to Brandon Staley being fired eventually. And then last year they got smoked. He actually had a very bad playoff game against the Texans. I think he had 4 picks, which is more than he had the entire regular season. But personally, that doesn't change what I see in Justin Herbert's potential. They've also had a team that's had a lot of big holes. They've had some coaching changes. And so I think that Justin Herbert has an extremely bright future. He's a quarterback that I think has his accuracy, his arm strength, and his decision-making, his frame all lead him to be an ideal franchise quarterback, and one who I think will continue to improve over the next 3-4 years and establish himself as, a franchise quarterback and one of the best 5 in the league for the foreseeable future. At number 6 in our quarterback rankings going into the 2025-2026 season is Jalen Hurts, who just won the Super Bowl. And so he was actually a pretty hard quarterback to place on this list, in my opinion, because he hasn't had some of the career highs in yards and touchdowns that a lot of these other guys and a handful of the guys behind him have established. But there's no doubt that he is a fantastic leader and that he just won the Super Bowl. He's been to another Super Bowl, and so his production is clearly successful. That's the goal. That's the whole reason you want a great quarterback and why we're trying to decide which quarterbacks we'd rather have so that we have a better chance of winning the Super Bowl, and he got it done. My main takeaways from, why I don't have Jalen Hurts higher over Burrow or Herbert or higher, and also, some of the limitations I see with him is I don't really feel like, other than rushing on, 4th and 1, that he has a ton of elite strengths. He's kind of like above average across the board on most things. By that I mean accuracy, arm strength, mobility, but none of them really jump out beyond rushing on short yardage situations and leadership as huge strengths to me compared to some of these other guys who pass for 5,000 yards. Jalen Hurts has never thrown for 4,000 yards in a season, nor has he ever thrown more than 23 touchdowns in a season. So if I'm looking at a franchise quarterback, I'm looking for a guy that can easily put up 30 touchdown passes in a season, especially now with 17 games. I'm looking for a guy that averages, hopefully at least 2 touchdowns a game. So the upside of him carrying the offense, although he's critical to it with those short yardage plays and with his dual threat abilities and his leadership, he doesn't exactly blow me out of the water in some of his core traits, nor has he had extremely high production in the yardage and touchdown passing categories. So I still have him at number 6, and most of it has to do with the playoff success. He also has a very strong team around him. Everyone knows that the Eagles O-line has been considered the best or top 3 in the league of his entire tenure, the last 4 or 5-ish years. Also, they have great weapons, in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, and a great defense that dominated the Chiefs' offense in the Super Bowls. Those are some of my holdbacks where I'm keeping him out of my top 5, but still very impressive dude and clearly capable of leading a team to a Super Bowl victory, if it's a well-rounded team. At number 7, kind of a shocker. I was even surprised how high I had him, but when thinking about everything, this is sophomore Jayden Daniels at number 7. And obviously obviously he's one who's can move a lot. If he regresses significantly next year, like CJ Stroud did in his sophomore season, then he could probably slide down, a handful of spots quickly. But we don't have that much tape on him, and what we do have was fantastic. He took the Washington Commanders to the AFC Championship game in his first season, right after they had an extremely high pick to be able to take him in the NFL draft and hadn't had any recent playoff success. So that alone tells you, this guy's a difference maker. He makes his team perform at the highest level and higher than the sum of their parts. And he's a great rusher. He seems to have exhibited great leadership from what I can tell. Guys really follow him and want to play with him, and they show up in the biggest moments. He's a great rusher. He had 891 rushing yards, which is absolutely incredible for any season. Nonetheless, a rookie who also succeeded as a passer, and by that he had 25 touchdowns and 9 interceptions and played really well in the playoffs too, in my opinion. So I just think he elevated his team, and he still could definitely get a lot better. And so the fact that he was that successful with a team that hasn't been his first year and didn't show a ton of flaws or poor decision making and has the physical passing and rushing ability, I have him at number 7 already, and excited to see whether he holds strong there, moves up, or slides back a little. It's hard to sustain that level of play over every year, especially as a sophomore, but extremely enticing young player in year 1. At number 8, we have Matthew Stafford, who was another one tricky to rank on here, just because I honestly thought that 2 years ago was going to be his last season. He's had so many injuries that throughout his career, a lot of them he's played through, but back injuries and smacked in the head and hand injuries and all this stuff, elbow injuries. So I honestly thought after winning the Super Bowl and being pretty banged up and having made, 9 figures plus a whole lot more in his career, I honestly am surprised that he's even played last season, but he still performed really well. And one thing about Matt Stafford is he's always put up the stats. He's always passed for a lot of yards, passed for a lot of touchdowns. He's led a bunch of receivers to record-breaking seasons, and Cooper Kupp and Calvin Johnson. He's got the Super Bowl on his resume, and although I've been a bit of a Stafford hater at times in the past, there's no doubt his ability to elevate the players on his team. He's led lots of guys who weren't Calvin Johnson-esque names to, being extremely relevant and upping their careers and their production. He's a guy who I feel like if you got, all 5 of your receivers, all 2 or 3 of your running backs, and all 2 or 3 of your tight ends can all be included. He's going to complete a pass to 9 different dudes in a game because he's able to read through all the different options and distribute the ball. And that's something extremely valuable for a play caller, to really be able to understand all the different available options on a play and make the right decisions to manipulate the defense and have long sustained drives. So Matt Stafford, although again, I'll say it every year, this may be his last season, he's still at a really high level, and so I'd expect him to be falling off in the near future. But as of now, can't keep him out of the top 10, and I got Matt Stafford at 8. Next up in our quarterback rankings, at number 9 is Baker Mayfield, who would have thought 2.5 years ago that he would, in my opinion, rightfully be considered a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. And I think most people, even if they don't quite put him that high, would have him pretty close, because Baker, he's like a guy who makes you just want to play for him. His swagger and his leadership, his ability to put his body on the line for the team. He's not trying to cop out of any contact or any criticism. He's willing to just put his, effort on the table and give you everything that he's got, and that would be a fun guy to play for. He passes for a boatload of yards, a boatload of touchdowns, and although, he can be kind of Jameis-esque sometimes where he's just slinging so much rock, he could have a few picks. Most of the time, it's working out for his team, and he's able to lead guys to huge games and huge seasons. He does have great weapons in Godwin and Evans, but he's proven that he can elevate other guys and pass to, 6 different receivers and multiple backs and elevate guys on his team. So I got Baker Mayfield at number 9. And last year he had 41 touchdown passes to 16 picks. 16 picks, that's about 1 a game, so not fantastic. But if you're throwing for 2.5 touchdowns a game, then that's plenty stomachable because you're making a ton of plays that a lot of quarterbacks can't make. Let's see. He had 4,500 passing yards, and at times last year, Evans was out for at least a month, and Godwin was out for half the season. And so to still put up 40-plus touchdowns and 4,500-plus yards with two-star receivers down shows you that this dude just comes to play and slings rock and can elevate the team around him. He's had some playoff success. He is 2-3, but in the playoffs, but he's also got 12 touchdowns to 3 picks, so he showed up pretty well in those games. Not to mention, he was basically left for dead by the Cleveland Browns, then quickly bounced between the Panthers and the Rams, and then the Buccaneers give him a shot, and then he's firmly established himself over the last couple of years as a franchise quarterback in the league and is still young, and someone we could be seeing playing for a long time. So that was Baker Mayfield at number 9, a little past halfway in our rankings now. Next up at number 10, I got the recently highly paid franchise quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers, Mr. Irrelevant No More, Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy's an interesting case because he has had, not last season, but the season before, his best season in 2023, an elite cast around him with Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel and George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey. But in that, any Niner fan or any fan that has been watching a lot of Niner games for a long time can see that he's different than the quarterbacks of the past. They've had decent quarterbacks, game managers in Alex Smith and Colin Kaepernick and Jimmy Garoppolo and others, but Brock Purdy elevates this. Just like I was saying about Matthew Stafford, he knows all of the available people on a play, and he's picking the right ones to strategically hurt defenses and make big plays. Also, a main misconception about Brock Purdy from the casual NFL fans or those haters that don't watch enough Niner football or know what they're looking at, this dude is the opposite of a check down guy. What makes him so exciting is that he absolutely slings rock. That intermediate area, I would say from, 12 yards to 25 yards, at least what I'm considering. Brock Purdy's about as good as any player, maybe the best in the NFL at that intermediate area of getting 15, 20-yard chunk plays, and he's extremely accurate. And that's one thing that jumped out to me when he was playing in the preseason, when he was just a guy that almost no one but Niner fans or Iowa State fans had heard of, and back up to Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo, maybe going to make the roster as the third or not. And he was just super accurate. It's like half of his balls are like couldn't possibly be placed better by anyone in the world. And there's a difference between getting it there and being accurate or on time, but the timing that he has and such a high percentage of his balls are immaculate. That makes a big difference when operating an offense over time. So Brock Purdy in 2023 was first in all qualified quarterbacks in QBR and passer rating. So I don't care what you got going on as your weapons. That is fantastic, obviously. And then in 2024, he was 7th in QBR still. And last year, Christian McCaffrey essentially missed the whole season, played a few games, banged up, and was unproductive in them. Brandon Ayuk missed the whole season other than a few games where he was completely ineffective in those. Deebo Samuel had to get traded for pennies on the dollar because he's overweight, slow, has no hands, and had a bad attitude last season. And so all of a sudden, it's all because of the weapons? Well, yeah, what happened last year when Deebo was unproductive and Brandon Ayuk was hurt and Christian McCaffrey was hurt, and not to mention Trent Williams was out, and the Niners already had an average O-line at best with him. Then they had a bottom O-line, a bottom 5 or 10 O-line in the league for sure last year. Still going to be 7th in QBR and 3rd in yards per attempt, meaning the opposite of a check down guy. This dude is slinging rock, and he has a great deep ball. And what he has as well is great footwork, and that allows him to be extremely accurate and to overcome not having the most arm strength in the league because he has such good footwork. He is maxing out his potential with those deeper passes. So I got Brock Purdy at number 10, and at number 11, we have CJ Stroud. He was a little tricky. He had a phenomenal rookie year, similar to Jayden Daniels. the Texans have been a little bit more relevant at times before, and they didn't go all the way to the AFC Championship game like Jayden did to the NFC Championship game, but he led them to a playoff win in both seasons as a rookie and as a sophomore, and won the division and had extremely great numbers as a rookie. And then as a sophomore, his numbers fell back a lot. Let's see, he had the second most sacks in the league to Caleb Williams, and less touchdowns and less yards. But ultimately, he didn't regress to where I question him being a franchise quarterback or not. It's just whether he's in that range of, can he ascend to the elite in the next 2-3 years, and be in that top 3, 4, 5 category of the top guys in the league? Or is he in that in between of, okay, he's better than an average quarterback at 14, 15, 16, but he's not in that top 4, and he, moves up in that middle range. So that's where CJ Stroud fell this year. I'm interested to see where he goes, or how he moves up or down this list in the 2025-2026 season. At number 12, I have Jared Goff, and he's one who I thought about putting a little higher, but ultimately some of the reasons I didn't is he's had one of the best O-lines in the league. He's had some fantastic weapons at his disposal. And most importantly, he's had Ben Johnson, who I believe has been the best offensive coordinator in the NFL over the past 3 seasons. He's been significantly ahead of the curve, and he's been pulling off amazing performances and designing amazing plays, and has great play calling. He's elevated a lot of his players and his team. And although I think Jared Goff has done about as good a job as you can, I do think that it was more the system than the quarterback's individual traits. I do think he is a good leader, but I think that ultimately he's more of a facilitator, and he's fantastic at that. He's been an accurate passer, and he's been more clutch than I thought he could be based on his earlier career in the playoffs and things like that. So I got a lot of respect for Jared Goff, especially from where he started at the Rams, going 0-1 win in his first season, looking super busty. Then having that trade being like, you're the reason we're not winning a Super Bowl. We got to ditch you. But he's really made a home. The Lions fans got to love him because he's helped turn their team around, but I am expecting a significant regression from him this year. Now that Ben Johnson is gone, I think that it's going to be hard to sustain as well as he has. Also, he's not very mobile, so ultimately, I have become a fan of Jared Goff and respect his game, but not quite enough to have him in the top 10, especially with a new offensive coordinator looming. So he's at number 12, and at number 13 is Jordan Love. Dropped a take on him recently. He's one who a lot of people have higher. I've seen people put him up at like 6 or 7. I personally think that's nuts. Jordan Love, I do think, will probably climb a couple spots up this list over the next 2 seasons, but I don't see his ceiling as high as a lot of other people do. I don't see it as being elite. Could be wrong there, but he definitely hasn't proven that to be the case yet. So I have to put some new evidence on tape for me to ever start drinking that crazy Kool-Aid. In the last 2 years in the playoffs, let's see, he had 3 interceptions to lose to the Eagles this year. That's not very elite. And the year before, he had back-to-back interceptions to grade Dre Greenlaw to lose to the Niners in the playoffs. So I'm not saying that means he's a bad quarterback, but he has thrown, a lot of picks in the playoffs that have been the reason why his team has lost games. And it's one thing to have 1, but 2 and 3. And so ultimately, I think that he does still have some ability to improve, but certainly the average spot I've seen him in quarterback rankings seems overrated to me. I think he is a slightly above average quarterback, but that's currently all he's put on tape at this time. A little bit inconsistent with his footwork. Hasn't really had the clutch gene, at least in the most important times in his career so far. Granted, we'll see a lot this year. They invested in 2 high weapons for him in Matthew Golden and Savion Williams. So interested to see what they do with some, first and third round talent thrown in there in their already packed wide receiver room. But these guys have a little higher pedigree than most of the ones that he's currently been throwing to. I'm so interested to see if a hierarchy kind of establishes itself in that wide receiver room with him now. Ultimately, it's just the sample size is a little small for me, so we'll see with another year on board if he can establish himself as, a top 10-ish quarterback in the league. But for now, I got him a few spots out of that. At number 14, I have Dak Prescott, and my main knock on Dak is that ultimately he beats bad teams really badly, and in the games against great teams and in the playoffs, he doesn't show up. and he doesn't do well. It's not like they're getting, beaten 34-37 in the playoffs. No, they're scoring like 9 and 12 and 15, so ultimately in the playoffs, their offense has been the problem. They've been, the reason they're losing games, and they've had some pretty embarrassing lowlights to reflect that in some of their recent playoff wins. And also, they're better than a lot of teams. It may not seem hard, but they do beat up their games on their schedule really badly when the team is inferior. But they're not very good against high-quality teams, and that ultimately is a big knock for me. He's also hurt last year for 8 games and has been hurt prior, so there's a little bit of worry there. He's also now potentially leaving his prime. I'm not saying he's left it yet, but he's definitely on the back 9 now of his career, even if it is on hole 10 or 11. So I don't know that he's got more to show than he already has shown, and there's a chance that that could be decreasing in time. Dak Prescott and Jordan Love are pretty interchangeable for me. I honestly think that Dak has shown a little bit more ability thus far, but ultimately I think he's moving potentially in a lower direction, and Jordan Love still has room to improve and ascend because he's so much younger and less experienced. So that's why I got them there, although could easily flip-flop those two for the present day. At number 15, I got Kyler Murray. He's a pretty interesting case because number 1 overall pick, extremely talented, has a very good arm for how small of a dude he is, and also is extremely quick and makes defenders look silly often, but never really put it together in terms of like a full season or in terms of like wins. So he's always done better in the first couple months of the season than he has in the last couple months. And sometimes they don't even do great in the first couple, but he's had some great starts to the season and then they slowly decline. And I don't know exactly why that is. Not saying it's the Call of Duty rumors if they're coming out in November or whatever, but there is some question there of like he hasn't led to much team success, and that's not all on him, but I haven't seen anything other than wow plays or individual wow games to think that he's a top 10 quarterback in the league, although his potential may still be able to get there. He's now played enough years to where I kind of think we know who he is, so maybe that'll change. Marvin Harrison Jr. coming back for year 2 looking stronger than ever could be a huge weapon to help establish his consistency, but ultimately that's it. I don't necessarily know what to expect on him on a game in and game out level. He's my dynasty fantasy quarterback last year, and although it wasn't a nightmare, it definitely wasn't, as exciting as I was hoping it would be. His record is 36-45-1, so, would love to see if he can turn that around and turn the Cardinals around. They're not exactly a cellar dweller, but they've certainly not been, one of the better half of teams in the league over his tenure and a little bit prior to that. And finally, finishing up these rankings, we got at number 16, the new quarterback of the Las Vegas Raiders, Geno Smith. And Geno's a very fascinating guy because he seemed like a bust. He'd played horrible with the Jets and had fallen off being a starter in the league, and then had a significant resurrection with the Seahawks a few years ago. That first year was fantastic. He kind of pulled a Darnold a little bit in that, and that he was better than Sam Darnold was last year, in my opinion, that first year with the Seahawks. But he did fall off the last few games. It kind of seemed like he was trying to hold on, like if you're a golfer and you have such a great round, you think you're playing out of your mind, and then you still got 3-4 holes left and you're just trying not to screw one up. But he has been consistent enough to still be considered an average starting quarterback over the last couple seasons after that great year. And he's certainly an upgrade for the Las Vegas Raiders after dealing with the whole Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew experiment and a bunch of other poor quarterbacks before that. I do think that he can help the Raiders emerge. I don't think that they could move into the elite category this season, but they could move into at least the average or potentially winners, threaten the playoffs, because they were greater than the sum of their parts last year, but their quarterback play was so bad it prevented them from getting wins, and Geno Smith might be the guy to prevent that, especially with Pete Carroll relationship and leadership going on there. So he's pretty accurate. I think that he seems like a pretty decent leader, and he's certainly good enough to hope to be your starting quarterback for 2 or 3 years, but ultimately he falls outside of the franchise quarterback rankings. I would put the other 15 guys, with the exception of Matt Stafford, in that franchise quarterback rankings. Stafford is, but You want a franchise quarterback that you can look through at least the next 3 years with. Otherwise, you have to be evaluating other quarterback options, whether it be trade or signing or drafting. And so purely because of age, Matt Stafford is out of there now, because you can't look 3 years down the road and think we got this guy locked up to lead our team. But all of the other top 15 guys, the other 14 of them, I would consider a franchise quarterback at this time, where they're good enough to where you can see down the road. You think that you can win the Super Bowl with them, and they can be a reason why your team wins the Super Bowl. They can help elevate your team, and that you're not immediately looking to try and improve on them because you feel like you have someone you can build your team around. That's a franchise quarterback to me, and I wouldn't put Geno Smith in that category anymore, but I think that he's the next best thing. He's the journeyman that you can get as a stopgap for 1 to 3 years, so that hopefully you can bring in a guy that you draft ideally, and that he can sit for 1 to 2 years behind a competent quarterback who knows what he's doing and has some journeyman experience, and then you can, move on and hope to tap into that upside in franchise quarterback ability by having him sit under Geno and then taking over. So that's my top 16. Few notable guys that missed the top 16. We'll have a few honorable mentions here. Aaron Rodgers just signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Aaron Rodgers has had a phenomenal career. He's a Hall of Fame quarterback. We all know that, but he's definitely fallen off over the last few years, and obviously he knows that if he's this heavily considering retirement. So the Jets experiment blew up. So he hasn't had a ton of success over the last few years. And a big part of being a starting quarterback is being a leader, and that's something that Rodgers is not his strength, as evidenced by him, not signing until this late, because he doesn't even know if he wants to play football, or if he does know he wants to play football, it's not important to him to give confidence to his teammates and get practicing with them, build relationships with them, instill confidence and experience with them. He'd rather just live his best life over the summer and then go hop in and play for a year, make some more money, get some more attention and snaps. And I don't have a problem with that, honestly, at all. I just don't think that's what I want in my starting quarterback, leading my franchise, setting an example for the other players, and trying to build a work ethic and culture that we can try and pursue a Super Bowl with. So Aaron Rodgers is left off. After that, Tua, he doesn't have the 3 years down the road purely because of the concussion history, and I do think that he's a guy who may struggle in a lot of different systems or with different coaches and weapons across the league, but he has done very well in his. Bo Nix had a fantastic rookie quarterback last year. I could totally see him improving and working his way onto this season or in the near future. Drake May as well. Drake May has not had a lot to work with in New England, but he's definitely put enough on tape to show that he's gritty, and I think that he has a little bit of Baker in him, and that he's willing to lay himself on the line and fight hard for a win for his teammates. He looks like a guy I'd want to play for, and he seems to have pretty good mobility, talent, and arm strength. So definitely excited to see where Drake May goes. And the fifth honorable mention is Darnold. He's definitely a stopgap quarterback. There's a lot of guys worse than all of these guys. I don't think you could win the Super Bowl with Sam Darnold, or if you did, you have to have such an amazing team that it's very unlikely. Trent Dilfer-ish team. And so I was totally expecting that collapse to come against the Lions and in the playoffs last year. Granted, he did do enough to show that he can be a productive starting quarterback, and there's 32 spots. So even if he's not in the top, 20 based on my list, that still means he's better than a lot of other guys, and he can be an upgrade to a team. So I'd be interested to see if he can do the same type of performance he did last year without Justin Jefferson and Addison, that were fantastic weapons for him last year. Or if that's we saw his peak and he's somewhere below that, good enough to hold a job as a starter for a while, but not good enough for you to not be looking elsewhere, which is where I would imagine he'll end up. So those are my top 16 NFL quarterbacks going into the 2025-2026 season, and interested to see where they move. Let me know, via Instagram or any other feedback if there's a guy you think's clearly missing, or who you think is the most off. Too overrated in my rankings, too underrated in my rankings. But that's going to conclude us here for episode 7 of Big Dawg Sports Unleashed. And thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to this episode of Big Dawg Sports Unleashed. You can find all of our episodes on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts. If you have other content that you want to hear our takes on next, follow us and send us your suggestions on Instagram at Big Dawg, that's DAWG, Sports Unleashed.